Welcome to Mountain Rambler. Thanks all for coming out and supporting ESAC. You guys are in for a double feature. We're going to go through the season and the state of the Snowpack so far, and then we're going to talk about some of the changes that go on the Snowpack, some of the reasons that it's developed the way it has, and the reasons Snowpack changed the way they do, so we can kind of understand the place that we're at right now this year. I was just telling everybody that the last time I gave a presentation at Mountain Rambler, it was also a slow start to the season in 2017, so I got to be the bad guy then too, so this will be fun. I first want to start by thanking all of these folks. They make ESAC possible. They make what we do possible. So thanks everybody, and thanks for Joe and the Mountain Rambler staff for having us tonight. Yeah! So a little operational update from ESAC this year. This year, for the first time, we have 4 forecasters. We have a new forecaster this year that we're all excited about working into the rotation, Sammy Rubin. We have our fearless leader, our director, Steve Mace. This guy right here. We have Everett Phillips, a snow safety extraordinaire. We have our new administrative manager, Barb Bemis. And then we have me, Clancy Nelson, East Side native. And I'm happy to be back at ESAC. This year, we had the 2nd annual Eastern Sierra Snow and Avalanche Workshop. If you didn't come out this year, come out next year. It's really educational. It's a good chance to see snow scientists and snow professionals presenting on what's going on in research. And then we had the biggest season kickoff that anybody at ESAC can remember. That was really awesome, and if you were there for that, thanks for coming out again. So this year, it's been a slow start. ESAC's been issuing daily forecasts since the 22nd, and this is how the danger ratings have broken down. And prior to that, we were putting out early season avalanche information updates as conditions warranted. So we've all been working since October. And this is what we all thought in October, right? So here's where we're at right now. We tend to use Sesame Snow Study Plot at Mammoth Mountain because that's maintained by actual professional humans, and it's not an automated weather station that just breaks down, and we'll get to it in the spring. So far this year, we have 51 inches of total snowfall at Sesame with 32 inches on the ground. And I went through the archives and dug up where we are at this exact time last year. And then I was too depressed to come up with what percent of last year we're at so far this year. So these 2 different graphs here also show us where we're at. The one on the left is from the LADWP snow sheds. And this one, the most recent update was actually in December. And in December, we were at 21% of normal. And then the graph on the right is put out by the Forest Service, the Natural Resources Conservation Centers, and that's for the drainages that go into Owens Lake, which is us here on the east side. And that one shows us at about 34% of normal. So we have improved, and I'm going to take that. And this is how I felt this morning. So going back detailed through the season, people remember that we already had snow on the ground at the start of this season. We had a lot of latent snow, that snowfall that sticks around in the alpine environment year after year. We had that left over from last season, and we had these tiny storms in October that really just left a trace anywhere except for right underneath the Sierra Crest. We got 15 inches of snow that month and 3 inches of water, and the vast majority of that came in one storm on November 17th. This is my first fieldwork day with our new forecaster, Sammy, in Rock Creek. This is on Mount Morgan South. There's about 6 inches of snow there, but our job is to babysit the snowpack from start to finish, so we did. So we did get that storm on the 17th to 18th, and that snow that on the ground was already weak and sugary and faceted. And we got some wind pack snow on top of that. And this is going to be a pretty big theme for this evening, so remember this. December was awesome. We got a whole foot of snow all month. The snowpack was already weak and faceted, like I said. Most of that snow came in a stormy period starting on the 18th. And we did see some pretty big persistent slab avalanches, particularly on the Mammoth Crest and around Mammoth Mountain. And sure enough, once we had enough snow to start actually issuing daily avalanche forecasts, the number one problem in the forecast was already persistent slabs. These avalanches were tricky not just because of the nature of persistent slabs, which makes them harder to manage and predict, but because there's so little snow anywhere that where you want to go is where there might also be the problem, and the consequences of an avalanche are really, really elevated because nobody likes to be dragged over rocks. So I went and visited this avalanche, and if you haven't seen the video, I'm going to replay it for you now. Happy holidays, everybody. It's Clancy from ESAC. We're in the Mammoth Lakes Basin looking at the crown of an avalanche that likely ran at the end of the last storm cycle. The hang fire is still sensitive. We're getting shooting cracks. And what's failing is this sugary layer of facets sandwiched between firmer wind deposits. That steps down again to, you guessed it, sugary facets. It ran on old snow left over from last year. And the scary thing is not just the size, but the consequences. It's low tide, there's rocks and boulders sticking up out of the debris for you to get dragged through, and this avalanche terminates in a cliff. So while we don't have much snow, the consequences of getting caught in an avalanche are really high. So after some wind-blown snow in December, this is the setup that we're all worried about going into the holidays. This is between Christmas and New Year's, and we have very weak snow on the ground and wind-deposited snow over top, and that's what we are seeing signs of instability on. January so far started out pretty dry. Believe it or not, a lot of those wind slabs on top of that thin, weak, sugary snow also became weak and sugary in the cold, dry weather. And there's some snow grains out there that my coworkers and I, with experience forecasting in the Rocky Mountains, are kind of raising our eyebrows at. That snow grain photo right there under a microscope, that's some of the biggest chain depth hoar that I've ever seen in the Sierra. I don't know if I've seen anything like that outside of the Rocky Mountains. So we're definitely looking at a much more continental snowpack than we usually have. The photo above of the snow pit there, Everett took on a field day, and that snowpack, while it is layered, it's pretty much facets on facets on facets. And while there are a few places where wind-blown slabs sit on top of those facets, by and large, it's a faceted snowpack that's waiting on a slab at this point in January. So Steve and I went out just before the first storm in January to conduct a little experiment to see what would happen when we put a slab on top of that snowpack. We followed an experimental format that Carl Birkeland came up with to look at the stiffness of a slab relative to avalanche failure. And I'll let Steve explain it to you.
We're out here in the Mammoth area today to get a look at our snowpack. Now, we've been talking a lot about the weak structure that we have throughout the forecast area. And basically, we have loose, faceted, weak grains throughout the entire snowpack. And what's been missing from the avalanche picture is really a cohesive slab across a good majority of the slopes. So today we're going to run our series of tests. We're going to do an extended column test and a propagation saw test, and then we are going to add an artificial load to those columns and run them again to get an idea of what might happen later this week as we start to see snow added to this weak snowpack structure. So in our extended column test, we saw propagation on our weak layer at 16 taps, so 6 from the elbow, right in the middle of the range. And here on our initial PST, we saw a vertical block fracture after a 40 centimeter cut, so almost halfway through the column.
We've used a cardboard frame to sift 10 centimeters of new snow on here, and importantly, to mimic a cohesive slab, we've waited a half an hour for this slab to sinter and stiffen up. So now we're going to cut through our weak layer and see how quickly it propagates up the column. So 35 centimeters into a 100 centimeter column with a 4-finger plus slab on top, and we get propagation through the weak layer. And we're going to try the ECT again. So with one tap, column fractured all the way across where we sifted the new slab onto the surface. So with the upper snowpack being faceted, when we get a new slab on top, we may have 2 separate weak layers. We'll have that basal weak layer underneath that could break, but the surface may also act as a new persistent weak layer.
We've got a storm coming in this evening. It might drop up to an inch of water weight along the Sierra crest. And with that added weight, we are likely to see increased hazard and sensitivity on these lower weak layers in the snowpack.
Don't get excited. This was January 2nd. But turns out the night of January 2nd, we did get that storm, and in that one storm we got more snow than we got in the whole month of December. The avalanche danger went to considerable, and we had several reports of explosive triggered, human triggered, and natural avalanches all around the Mammoth area, which is where there's the most snow. This is a human triggered avalanche in Red Cone Bowl. And then following that, we got that typical turnaround of the winds that we get in the Sierra, but these ones were really extreme. We got north winds, and Everett and I from the top of the Sherwin Ridge actually watched the snow on Red Cone disappear, and it got stripped right back down to the rock. So I guess you could say that there are some places where we don't have the persistent slab right now. So then we got a second storm, January 6th, 7th. It came in the afternoon, snowed hardest in the evening, and was gone again after midnight. We got 9.5 inches to about 13 inches of snow and an inch of water, and again with really strong winds, this time back from the southwest. And this is our most significant natural avalanche cycle of this season, as we slowly build up more and more slab on top of the weak snow. So if we've been listing persistent slab avalanches, and we've been listing them consistently since we started forecasting on the 22nd, why no more avalanches? How come we're only seeing these short avalanche cycles during loading periods? And then the problem doesn't go away, but the avalanche activity tends to trend down. There's 2 reasons. The first one you can see in this picture of Lundy Canyon, the coverage isn't that awesome, so the places that snow can slide are not that diverse. The other one is that in a lot of places where we have this cold, dry weather, after we get a slab, that slab facets, especially below tree line. And you can see that we were listing persistent slab avalanches near and above tree line. But when we got that storm on the 6th and 7th, those winds were strong. And they were strong at all elevations. Anybody get blown over at a trailhead or on the highway during that storm? Yeah, a couple people are admitting that they weren't that smart. That's fine, I wasn't either. But we got wind slabs below tree line. How about that? How often does that happen? And then sure enough today, after some signs of instability, we realized we have a slab over those facets below tree line, and we expanded the distribution of persistent slabs. So we've seen a lot of recent signs of instability just over the last 3 days. We've seen shooting cracks. We've had people reporting collapses near and below tree line. We even had some small remotely triggered avalanches below tree line on both of those persistent weak layers we talked about in the video. So here's the scary part. Not that we're going to have to shovel snow. But the storms that we're getting so far this year and the storms in the forecast are not these awesome Sierra crusher house burying, flush out the weak layers, crush the facets storms. We're seeing incremental loading that's gradually building a slab. The phrase that's been tossed around the forecasting office is the slow roll to critical mass, where we're not seeing huge natural avalanche cycles that crush and flush, and then you can ski the facets. We're seeing a slowly developing slab that's going to get to a certain point where skier trigger could be really easy and unpredictable. So what's ahead? This came out from the National Weather Service briefing this morning, and we are looking at a period of some pretty serious snowfall tomorrow night. Awesome. It is not multiple feet of snow like we frequently expect here in the Sierra, but it's looking pretty good. It's also looking like extreme wind and cold, but I'm going to take what we can get. And then for the extended, we do look like we might be above average precipitation. The storm door, as they say, should remain open, and I would be really happy if the long-term forecast panned out. It is also supposed to be above average temperatures, and so that'll be interesting to see if that snow comes in really heavy and adds a whole bunch of loading on top of these weak layers really fast, or if it still happens gradually and warms up and helps condense and consolidate some of that new snow into a slab. So before I roll into our next presentation here, does anybody have any questions about the season so far?
You compare the more northern portions of Sierra, like Tahoe, to the central here, and then the would-be southern area?
Yeah, I can. So I just want to clarify, I don't hear very well, y'all, so you're asking me to compare Tahoe, Central Sierra, and South, correct? Cool. I don't live in Lone Pine, and I don't forecast for Tahoe, just as a caveat. But this season, where did the snow go? It went north. And Tahoe is also griping about a really low snow year and a shallow snowpack, and they do have that. But they have been getting more of the precipitation that we've been missing. Their avalanche forecasts have been for higher danger ratings more frequently than ours. They have better coverage, so they have already expanded their persistent slab problem to lower elevations. And they also have this huge water source and a really good cold air sink, so they've been adding surface ore to the mix of their persistent slab problems too. They typically do see a little bit more precipitation than we see. In fact, right around Mammoth, with that straight shot through the mountains where the snow doesn't get wrung out yet, going up the San Joaquin River drainage and empties right at Mammoth Mountain, that small microclimate of deeper snow, more maritime, is similar to Tahoe, unlike the rest of the central and the southern Sierra, where we have a lot of crests for storms to get wrung out before they hit the east side. And so the central Sierra is typically a little bit drier, and it gets different both north and south of Mammoth. The north does pick up a little bit more precipitation, but as you go south, you have to have a much more southwest storm track to really get snow south of Bishop, Independence, and Lone Pine. Did anybody else have any more questions? Give me a really good shout.
Should we see a lot of snow this winter, disregarding the existing leaf layers? Do you foresee any issues with the interface between new snow this winter and the existing snow in north-facing couloirs from last year? Great question.
That's a great question. So what we already have in those start zones with the latent snow left over from last year, is that your question?
Yeah.
Cool. So facets develop right when there's a big temperature change, and that snow that hung around and got really icy in couloirs is really, really cold, and any little dusting of snow that fell on that likely faceted. And then also those start zones may have been this steep, and then they developed snow last year, and then it didn't melt, so now they're a little bit steeper. And the bed surface of that ship's prow avalanche that I visited on the Mammoth Crest was latent snow from last year.
If we have this pattern that continues with minimal snowfall and not necessarily warmer storms to help consolidate the snowpack, are there any lessons we can learn from our continental friends in Utah and Colorado, what we got going on here?
Skiing 25-degree POW is awesome. By 25 degree, I mean a slope angle of 25 degrees. Cool. Are we ready to move on and learn a little bit more in detail about changes in the snowpack? All right, bear with me for just a sec. And now for something a little different. So, know your audience. Who's a skier? Woo! Who's a snowboarder? Who likes to brat? Oh, come on. Yeah, all right. Who's an alpine or ice climber? In Bishop? Come on. All right. Snowshoers? Woo! Competitive snow angelers. Yeah! Now you're talking. How many people have taken Avi Awareness? Seen the KBYG video? Cool. How many people have taken a level 1? Okay. How many people have taken an advanced course, a level 2, a rescue course, Pro 1? Nat Heights here, who used to be on Mammoth Mountain Ski Patrol and direct the explosive program, so I got to deal with that. How many people are just here for the food and beer?
Yeah.
All right, cool. Well, we'll try to keep you entertained. So those of us that are here for the avalanches know dry slab avalanches are the main contributing factor to accidents. And so that's what we're going to talk about. We're going to focus on the different things that go on in the snowpack and the different layerings in the snowpack that contribute to dry slab avalanches midwinter. We're going to start simple, and then we're going to build up from there, so hopefully there'll be something for everyone. And the people that are just here for the food and the beer, there's something for you at the counter. I said we were going to start simple. Snow falls from the sky. In case you forgot this year, snow falls from the sky. Then the wind comes along and redistributes that snow from one place to another place. But the bottom line is that the snowpack develops in layers over time. Are you with me so far? Those layers aren't all the same, right? And they're not glued together with frosting. This isn't a layer cake. They have a whole bunch of different properties. They have different snow crystals, different kinds of snow, and that snow bonds together in different ways. And those layers have different densities, different strengths. There's a whole lot of different things going on between those layers in the snowpack. And those layers change over time. They change not only because of the weather, but they change from processes going on between the ground and the snowpack and the atmosphere. This profile is a profile that Steve did on the top of the Sherwin Ridge this year. He did this on December 28th. This profile is about 100 yards away on January 5th. Everett and I dug this profile in a similar area, and you can see that in just that short time, the snowpack's become much, much weaker, much more faceted. If you can't see that, you stick with me. We're getting there. So why do we care? Well, it's the layers in the snowpack and the information about those layers that give us a slab, a weak layer, and a bed surface. Those are the things that you need if you want to have a slab avalanche. So, the things about the weak layer, the layers in the snowpack, some people call those yellow flags because they're contrasting them to the red flag observations that we know to make about instability, right? Things like natural avalanches, shooting cracks, collapses, we call those red flags. So some people call these snowpack indicators yellow flags, and some professionals just call them lemons. So our first lemon is that we have a weak layer, and that weak layer is made up of a persistent grain type. And this alien language up here, these symbols, are the things that snow professionals use to talk to each other about those different persistent grain types. So that square is what we use to depict faceted grains. The reason is that facets are square, and they're like rock salt or sugar. They don't stick to each other very well. You can sift them through your fingers if you want to do the old forecaster handshake for the camera. Then that pyramid there is what we use to depict depth hoar, which are really big facets. And the V is what we use to annotate surface hoar. So those are the main three persistent grain types that we're going to be talking about. If you have facets, surface hoar, or depth hoar, you have one lemon. Surface hoar. Who's holding a beer? Has anyone noticed any condensation on the outside of their glass? A little bit of moisture? It's because your beer is colder than the surrounding air. And it cools that air, and that colder air can't hold as much moisture. And it's got to go somewhere. So it condenses onto the surface of your glass. So now imagine that the surface of your glass is the surface of the snowpack. And the beer is way, way colder. So the air over it gets super cooled, and it deposits its moisture right on the snowpack surface, and it instantly freezes vertically from the snow surface up in these really, really beautiful, sparkle, fluffy looking unicorn fur kind of feathery grains. Let's talk about another process that goes on in the snowpack. How many people boiled a pot of water? There's like 5 people raising their hands. That's awesome. How many people have boiled a pot of water? Awesome. Why does it work? How come it steams? That burner is hot, right? And the air above the pot is not. Hot air can hold more water. And things being the way they are in our physical world, everything wants to be in stasis. We all want to be the same. So when I got a lot of moisture somewhere, it wants to go where there's not a lot of moisture so that it can be the same. And so when we boil water, the hot water, the air right above it, all of that water vapor goes into that air and we get steam. The same thing is happening in the snowpack. The ground actually gets insulated by the snow, like a down jacket. And it keeps the ground at about freezing, which is warmer than the air above it. And so water vapor rises up through the snowpack. And as it rises up through the snowpack, it refreezes on every little grain it hits. And because of the shape of water molecules, it starts to form these angular grains called facets. And if those angular grains keep growing over weeks, then they form these pyramid cup shapes called depth hoar. And if it keeps going, that depth hoar forms little chains of pyramids. And if you have a ball, you have infinite surfaces that you can stick things to that ball on, right? But if you have a cube, all of a sudden you have little individual faces, or little individual edges, or little individual corners that you can stick things to it, right? And the bonds aren't as big. So how does this happen, and how can we change this from happening? So if we have a shallow snowpack, like the one on the left here, we have two temperatures, the temperature on the ground and the temperature at the surface, and there's a big change between those two temperatures over a very short distance. That's what we call a gradient. And we use the temperature gradient just as a crude measure of what we actually care about, which is the water vapor gradient. And because we know that warm parcels of air can hold more water than cold parcels of air, we know that that gradient is going to cause faceting because water vapor is going to move up through the snowpack and refreeze. Then, if we have a deep snowpack, or it's really warm at the surface, then we've changed the gradient and it's not as extreme and we don't get as much faceting. In fact, we might even get some rounding and a stronger snowpack. And that right there is one of the main reasons that North America, in fact the world, gets broken up into different snow climates. Because how close you are to the ocean changes how much precipitation you get, deeper or shallower snowpack. But the ocean is a great modulator of temperature, right? It can always be 60 degrees at the beach in the Northwest, right? But then you move inland, and the continentality of a place like Colorado means that it's really hot during the day and really cold at night. So we tend to have these different snowpacks. The Sierra is typically categorized as a maritime snowpack, and Colorado is typically categorized as a continental snowpack, where the snowpack is shallow, weak, faceted, the danger is slow to rise, but then slow to fall. Is Colorado always going to have continental conditions? No, right? Is California always going to be maritime? Say it with me. No. All right, we're going to go for our second lemon here. The bigger those grains get, I think I already said it, the weaker they are because the smaller the bonds they can form between other grains. So this is our magnified photo of chained depth hoar again. And just for reference, those little squares are 2 millimeters square. So if those grains are at least 1 millimeter in size, we got another lemon. The difference in grain sizes is really important. The difference between the layers and the snow grains is what tends to make snowpacks unstable. You don't want to try to put a block of concrete on top of some sand, right? So if we have a grain size difference between layers of greater than 0.5 millimeters, we got a third lemon. How many people here know how to read a snow profile? Okay, I only have a couple people raising their hands, so everybody's either MIA again, or we're going to go through a little exercise. If you were going to hit somebody without a weapon, what would you use? If you were going to rise up against the man, what would you use? Your fist. Yeah, thank you. Why? Because it's the biggest, bluntest thing you can make with your hand. What do you always have with you, barring any horrible accident? Your hands, right? So if I can take my fist and I can push it into a layer of weak snow, then we're going to call it fist-hard snow. And that's the softest we're going to say that snow can be, because that's all I got with me is my hand. Then the next smallest thing I can make my hand that's still pretty big might be what? 4 fingers. If I took 4 fingers and pushed them into a layer because I couldn't push my fist into it, we're going to call that layer how hard? 4 fingers. The next smallest thing is 1 finger. And if it's too hard for my 1 finger, I'm going to take my pencil or my pen. And I'm going to push it in there, and I'm going to call it pencil hard. If it's too hard for that, I'm going to use my pocket knife blade and call it knife. And if it's too hard for that, let's just call it ice. The differences between the layers are what create unstable snowpacks. If I have a hand hardness difference between 2 layers of at least 1 step or more, and the harder layer is on top, I got another lemon. This one's super important. So strong layers in the snowpack can get manually compacted by it snowing just really, really hard, or by wind packing the snowpack, or by temperatures sintering and settling the snowpack. But gravity is also always working on the snowpack, and it's dragging those grains down. And as the air spaces between those grains get smaller and smaller, there's more places where they can bond together. So that settlement improves bond strength, and we get strong layers in the snowpack. And if we have a strong, cohesive layer in the snowpack, we call that a slab. And it's all about the slab. Because with the 3 phases of avalanche release, we can have initiation of a fracture with just a weak layer. I can cause damage to a weak layer. I can just step on the surface ore, but there's no avalanche. I need to have an overlying slab that has just the right density and just the right elasticity to carry that fracture and cause it to start to propagate. And then I need to have a slope so that I can have that propagation expand across the slope and accelerate even faster and faster up and down the slope in what we call super shear. And then I can actually have an avalanche release. But all of that is about the properties of the slab. Lemon number 5, how deep is that weak layer? How thick is your slab? If it's less than 1 meter, we got a lemon. And the reason for that is because the depth that you or I can affect that weak layer is typically about 3 feet deep in the snowpack. Now, if we vary the characteristics of any one of our important layers, if we have a really, really hard, smooth bed surface and a really, really weak layer, and we have a particularly stiff or thin slab at the edges, we can propagate a fracture across a whole slope on a very, very deep slab. But as a general rule of thumb, if it's within that 1 meter, 3 foot range, that's where you and I can typically affect the weak layer. So we got a lemon. There is one more lemon that I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time talking about, but weak layers that fail in avalanches tend to be less than 10 centimeters thick. We could spend all night talking about why that is, so I'm not going to go into it. So you're lucky you get away tonight with only 5 lemons. All right. I need somebody to tell me a lemon, and I need to be able to hear you.
Less than 1 meter deep.
What's that?
Less than a meter deep.
Less than a meter deep. Lemon for you. We got 4 more. I need another lemon.
Greater than 1 hand.
What's that?
Greater than 1 hand hardness.
Yes.
Difference between the layers.
Lemon for you.
Thank you.
Good catch. I need another lemon.
Greater than 0.5 millimeter,
What's that?
greater than half a millimeter grain difference.
Difference between the layers? Lemon for you. I got a couple more lemons. I got a lot more lemons, but you got a couple more lemons to work through. I need another lemon.
Right over 1 millimeter.
Yeah. Somebody pass that man a lemon.
Oh gosh.
Somebody give me another lemon. And I'll give you a lemon. Anybody? Okay. The next step of this quiz. How many lemons does the red line in this snow profile have? We have. The bottom layer is chained deptor. Those grains are 6 to 8 millimeters. The grains in the layer over top are 3 millimeters. The chain deptor is fist hard. The layer over top is 1 finger. The whole snowpack is about 50 centimeters deep. How many lemons? 5. I heard 5 first from this man right here. How many lemons at the red arrow that says ECTP 14? The overall snowpack is 80 centimeters deep. We got deptor at the bottom, and it is 4 to 6 millimeters. The layer above is 1 finger. That's all the information we have. How many lemons could we have? What's that?
2.
I'm hearing 3, 2. What do we have?
4.
Did somebody say 4?
Yeah,
Who said 4? Yes. Somebody pass a lemon for me. All right. So we've talked about changes in the snowpack that create strong and weak layers. We've talked about the different snowpack climates and what we have here this year in the Sierra and why that's really unusual and why you may want to think a little bit more before you go shred the steep stuff once we get snow. I want to know if anybody has questions. If you have questions, I have a couple more lemons left as a reward. Yes?
How does climate change affect El Nino patterns?
Excuse me. Kelly, you're killing me. I can't hear you.
No, and it's a hard one. How does climate change affect El Nino patterns?
Good luck.
How does climate change affect snowpacks? You know, this past fall, I went to the biannual International Snow Science Workshop, and for the past 3, 4, climate change and avalanches has been 2 whole sessions of ISSW. So there's a lot of really smart people from Europe doing snowpack modeling that can tell you about that. I can tell you that things get a lot more unusual. Overall, air temperatures get warmer. Overall, snow lines tend to move up. Overall, snowpacks get smaller. Overall, seasons get shorter with snow on the ground. I have been reassured by several Europeans with degrees in computers that there may be snow in avalanche start zones in the year 2100. So that's cool. That's all I got for an answer for you on that. Any other questions? All right, if you come up with any, I have some lemons left in my bag and I'm happy to talk about this stuff. So if you're a one-on-one type of person, let's geek out together. Thanks.